Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for Carnegie College. For those of you that haven't been here, welcome and welcome back. For those of you that have come to these before, and just as a reminder, at the end we have a survey, so it's very important that we get your feedback not only on our speaker, which I'm sure will be marvelous, but more importantly, or just as importantly, a lot of the events that we create and speakers that we bring in are directly a result of the feedback that we get from you, so that would be appreciated. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Sharona Hoffman, who I know Richard Alt from Carnegie had the opportunity to hear you speak and was very impressed and thought it would be a great topic for our clients. So with that, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. So my talk is based on a book that I wrote, and I thought I would start by talking a little bit about why I wrote this book and then get into some of the substance of it. And I did bring copies with me, so afterwards if you want to get one, it will be $29 cash or check. So the book grew out of a very difficult period in my life. During 18 months in 2013 and 2014, both of my parents died, my mother-in-law died, and my husband was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease at the age of 55. So as I was going through all of this, I learned a lot about the legal, medical, social, financial, and other challenges of getting older and getting sick and ultimately facing death. Now, I am a professor of law and bioethics at Case Western Reserve University, so I knew something about the doctrine and theory of some of these issues, but there's nothing like personal experience to really enliven your knowledge and drive those lessons home. In the middle of all this, in July of 2014, I faced a pretty big birthday. Now, when I talk to audiences like this, they boo and they laugh at me, but I turned 50. That was a big deal to me, right? But still.
Right.
And I realized that as difficult as things were for our parents, they could be even more difficult for Andy and for me because we don't have children. We don't have anyone who's going to drop everything and rush to our aid when we need it. So life has taught me that it is full of surprises, some of which are unpleasant. It is unpredictable. And as much as I want to control everything, and I do, I can't. Nevertheless, there is a lot to be gained from thinking ahead and planning ahead and trying to put some safeguards in place. So the book was sort of therapeutic for me. It helped me think through things and deal with my own anxieties, which are considerable. But more importantly, I tried to take my personal and professional experience and put it to good use in helping others. So people ask me who should read this book, and of course I answer everyone. I think it is helpful to people who are already seniors, who are facing some of these challenges, but it's also helpful to people like me who should be thinking ahead to their own aging and to having to care for elderly loved ones, and that can happen at any time. So I tried to pack the book with a lot of practical advice. There are checklists at the end of each chapter. I do talk about research and studies to back up some of the points, and then I also have a lot of personal anecdotes. I had a lot to work with, and so hopefully it's pretty readable. So let's briefly outline the topics of the book and then get into some of them in more detail. So I start with money matters, finances, because that's relevant to everything, and I will talk more about that in a minute. The benefits of community living. So we hear a lot about aging in place, staying in the home that you've had for decades and maintaining your autonomy, and that can be really great. But it's only great if you will be able to remain socially active, if you can go out and do things, if people will come visit you, check on you, that you're safe in the home. If you have stairs, maybe you're not. And so for some people, there is a risk of social isolation. And a theme that runs throughout the book is the importance of social interaction throughout life. Social interaction is associated with better mental health, better physical health, and even longevity. So by coming out and doing something like this, you are making yourself live longer. You can thank me later. By contrast, loneliness is associated with a lot of health problems. More cardiovascular problems, higher blood pressure, more insomnia. So if there is a risk of social isolation, it is well worth thinking about moving into more of a community setting. And we have a lot of great options in Northeast Ohio, independent living, apartments that are mostly seniors, continuing care retirement communities like Judson. But of course, you have to have money for that, so financial planning is a good thing. Oops. All right, what if you are like me and you're not going to have someone who is going to help you with your daily finances, geriatric, getting medical care, or things around the house? And so I talk about some emerging service industries like daily money managers, geriatric care managers, home organizers, and others. What do you need to know about these professionals? How do you go about hiring them? Essential legal planning. I'm a law professor, so I will talk about that more. Driving while elderly. Has anyone had issues in their family with older drivers? Not that many. Okay, but some. That was a big issue in my family and very, very difficult. So this chapter has a bunch of advice about how you identify people who are at risk of not being safe drivers, and how you go about having what can be very emotional, difficult conversations about maybe you should restrict your driving or not drive anymore at all, and how you avoid all the tears and hysteria that happened in my family. Care coordination, treating the patient, not diseases. That's about medical care. We will get to that. Long-term care, nursing homes, assisted living, in-home care. What do you need to know about these options? How do you figure out what the best fit is for you or your loved ones? And exit strategies, maintaining control at the end of life. That's about end-of-life decision-making, and I will touch on that. So I thought I would start with some facts and figures by way of background. In 2015, we had 47.8 million people who were 65 and older, and that was 14.9% of the population. In 2012, we also had 5.9 million people who were 85 and older. By 2030, it's expected that we'll have 72 million seniors, and that will be 20% of the population. And then it will plateau. It won't keep growing in terms of percentages, but we will jump from almost 15% to 20% in about 12 years. So why is that? Of course, that's because of the baby boomers. The baby boomers began turning 65 in 2011. Baby boomers are defined as people born between 1946 and 1964. When I saw that 1964 number, I became very upset. I thought I was Generation X or Y or one of those cool generations. I'm the last year of the baby boomers. So now I have to say we baby boomers. By 2050, we will have 19 million people who are 85 and older. Life expectancy. In 2013, it was 76.4 years for males and 81.2 years for females. But these are averages. They are just averages. It turns out if you are 65 or older, you actually have a higher life expectancy because you've survived all the hazards of infancy and childhood and being a teenager. So everyone here has decades ahead, don't worry. Now we cannot ignore Alzheimer's. In 2016, there were 5.4 million people with an Alzheimer's diagnosis. And Alzheimer's is only one type of dementia, so millions of others have other types of dementia. Of interest to me, the childless. About 16% of women between the ages of 40 and 50 have not given birth. If you don't have children or don't have children that will help you, you need to do more planning for your later years. And regardless of your family status, you have to take the possibility of dementia into account. So let's start with finances. How are Americans about saving for retirement? Not that good. 60% of workers have household savings of under $25,000. And 34% of the workforce has no retirement savings at all. That's probably not true for you because you're associated with Carnegie, but it might be true for friends and loved ones who you may find need help because of this financial situation. Why do you need money? Well, because it's expensive to be alive, it turns out. So, seniors, median out-of-pocket costs for medical care alone, this is not living expenses, this is not cruises, this is medical costs alone, are expected to be a little over $3,200 in 2020 each year and $6,200 by 2040. These are annual costs. Why is that? Because there's a lot of stuff that Medicare doesn't pay for and even Medigap insurance doesn't pay for. You have copays, you have deductibles, co-insurance. You also have, I hope that's not me ringing, you also have a lot of things that are just not covered, like hearing aids, vision care, a lot of other things. Okay, so high costs. Okay. These costs add up, right? A 65-year-old couple who is going to live their full life expectancy can anticipate needing $240,000 total for medical costs. That does not include long-term care. If you need long-term care, you're really facing high costs. Nursing homes, $85,000 a year on average for a private room. $75,000 on average for a semi-private room. A semi-private room means you have a roommate. It's not private at all. I don't know why they call it semi-private, but it's still very expensive. Assisted living, $42,000 a year on average. In-home care, that is having someone come from an agency and take care of you, that is $19 to $20 per hour. My father had 24/7 in-home care for the last 4 months of his life. We calculated that if that went on for a year, it would have been $175,000 for 24/7 care from an agency. Extremely expensive. So what can you do? There's long-term care insurance. Long-term care insurance is a complicated product. It's not a good fit for everyone. You really need to get good advice about whether this is a good investment for you. There's also reverse mortgages. They are advertised by all kinds of television stars, right? We see them on television all the time. That is also a problematic product. You need to get really good advice about whether that's a good thing to do. So talk to your financial advisors if you are considering these. I think that's all I'll talk about finances for now. So we'll go on to one of my favorite topics, legal documents. How do we do about what I call legal preparedness? Well, 41% of baby boomers don't even have wills. They don't have the most basic document. There's another document called an advance directive that has to do with instructions for medical care later in life, and only 18 to 36% of adults have that. So we have a lot of work to do. So what do you need? You need a will. If you don't have a will, your assets will be distributed to your children and your legally married spouse. And that might be fine for a lot of people. Maybe that explains why some people don't have wills. But if there's anything else you want to do, give some money to nieces, nephews, charity, you have to leave those instructions in a will. It won't happen otherwise. If you have a lot of money, it's worth considering a trust. Trusts have a lot of advantages, not least of which is that the people who inherit don't have to go through probate. No judge has to get involved, so it's much easier to distribute your assets. Another way to avoid probate is something called payment on death or transfer on death. How many people know what that is? This is generally an educated crowd. I'm impressed. So this is a mechanism to assign certain assets to particular beneficiaries. So after you die, your car will go to your sister, your house will go to whoever, your bank accounts to another person. You have to go to the right place and fill out the right form. The bank for the bank accounts, the Department of Motor Vehicles for the car, the deed people downtown for the house. But it's not cumbersome, it's a simple form, and it gives people a lot of peace of mind, so well worth considering. Again, no judge will have to get involved. All right, you don't only need to leave these instructions, it's even more important to have a decision maker. If you develop dementia or a traumatic brain injury or some other illness, you have to have someone who can keep your affairs going, who can write checks, pay bills, decide if certain property needs to be sold to pay for your care. So this person, and actually it shouldn't be just one person, you need to name an alternate in case the original person is herself incapacitated or unavailable. So these people need to be people that you trust, that you share information about your assets with, and you tell them how can they get a hold of them, who should they call, what are your banks and your resources. You need to have people you trust that you can make your decision makers. Now, the importance of this was demonstrated to me by the story of a colleague at work. Her parents in their 80s were aging in place in the home they'd had for decades, and one day there was a catastrophic fire. The house burnt to ashes, the paperwork was gone, the computer melted. Her mother escaped, but she had dementia. She didn't understand anything about finances. The father died of his wounds, and he had been one of these really private, independent people. When the adult children tried to have discussions with him about finances, he would say, "None of your business. You're trying to get a hold of my money. Leave me alone, don't bring it up again." And so it took them over a year to figure out what insurance policies were there, what bank accounts, how would they pay for their mother's care. So it terribly compounded the tragedy, and that shouldn't happen to anyone. So I'll take questions at the end. So that brings up another point, which is don't just put your documents in one place in a drawer. Your decision makers should have copies. Your financial advisors should have copies. There should be copies around so people can get them. I also throw in provide funeral instructions. A lot of people tell me, I don't want to burden my children. Let them do what they want. I don't care. I'll be gone. That is not a kindness. Okay? When a parent dies, it is extremely stressful for the children. Hopefully they're really upset that you died, right? And so the last thing they want to do is try to start figuring from scratch how to honor you, what kind of a service you would want, who should they call, what should they do. The more instructions you leave, the better off it is for your loved ones. All right, so you don't only need a decision maker for finances. You also need one for health care. So you need a person and an alternate with whom you feel comfortable discussing what your care preferences would be if you can't make your own decisions because of dementia or traumatic brain injury, etc. Would you want very aggressive care at the end of life? If you have dementia and are very sick, would you want artificial nutrition and hydration? Would you want dialysis? Would you want a ventilator? What are your religious beliefs about end-of-life care? You need to have those conversations so that people know how you would want to be treated. So a durable power of attorney for health care. Now, if you don't have that, you will get emergency care, you will get end-of-life care, but there may be some types of care that you can't get because you don't have a decision maker. So I sit on the ethics committee of university hospitals. And we had one case where a man came in with his adult daughter. He was in a lot of pain. He needed a procedure to remove kidney stones. And the doctors talked to him and they determined that he could not make his own decisions. He seemed confused, he seemed out of it. So the daughter said, okay, I consent to this procedure, please get on with it. And the doctors said, wonderful, show us your durable power of attorney for health care. And they didn't have one. And the doctors refused to do that procedure, even though he was in pain, because they were concerned that if something went wrong, they would not be able to show that they had gotten informed consent from someone with authority to provide that consent who understood the risks. So nobody should have that happen. You can also have a living will. In Ohio, actually, you get a package, a durable power of attorney for health care, plus a living will, plus an organ donation form. If you want to donate organs, and that is a good thing to do if you don't have objections, we have a terrible shortage, you need to indicate that on your driver's license and also on a form, because when the time comes, you might not have your driver's license anymore. A living will provides instructions about the very end. What, would you want a ventilator and dialysis and all that? But it only applies if you are terminally ill, permanently unconscious, or in a vegetative state. So it's even more important to have a decision maker because you might need decisions made for you long before you reach that stage, again, because of dementia or some injury. Last point. It is not good enough to just write up all these documents, put them in a drawer, and forget about them for 30 years. You need to rethink them every few years. We say every 5 years, because things change. You might move to Florida. I'm about ready with all this snow in March, right? Well, they are governed by state law, so you have to make sure that they are consistent with your new state's laws. You might have gotten a divorce. Do you really want your ex as your decision maker? Somebody important might have died and you need to change your will. So just think about them, think about whether they need to be updated every few years. All right, medical care. So I think most of us, if not all of us, hope that we will die in our sleep, right? Just fall asleep and never wake up. So I hired a research assistant to try to find out how often that happens. She came back with very bad news. So bad it wouldn't come up. No. Okay. Only 7 to 15% of people die what is considered to be a sudden death. That is a death that is not explained by anything in the medical record. A massive heart attack, a stroke, a car accident, that happens rarely. And so most of us have to experience a period of decline. In fact, I read a study that said that 45% of seniors have 2 or more chronic conditions. I read another study that said that number is 77%. But we're having a nice lunch, and that is too depressing, so I'm sticking with 45% for now. So what do? We run to specialists. So seniors see an average of 4 specialists. And specialists can give you great care, especially in Northeast Ohio, the Cleveland Clinic, university hospitals, other places. But there is a risk. And the risk is that nobody will oversee your care, and then your care can become fragmented. So you can take a lot of drugs and have a drug-drug interaction, or have one condition treated aggressively to the detriment of other conditions, or have treatment that causes cognitive decline. And I saw that firsthand with my mother. About a year before she died, something terrible happened to her. She went in a matter of 2 days from being a frail but completely lucid 83-year-old to being as though she had advanced Alzheimer's. She stopped communicating, she stopped wanting to eat, she slept most of the day, and when she was awake, she sat in front of the television with a blank stare. And we couldn't understand what happened. And what happened was a drug-drug interaction. She had been on 12 drugs, not here in East Lansing, Michigan. 12 drugs. What an 83-year-old who weighs 104 pounds is doing on 12 drugs, I don't know. But they added a 13th, and it was an unlucky 13. It robbed her of all of her cognitive capacities. So we actually took initiative, and we slowly took her off of most of the drugs. We got her down to 5. And she regained her cognitive capacities. But there were 2 months, from April to June of 2012, that she completely didn't remember. We told her stories, and she didn't believe it even. And I have since heard and read of other accounts like this. So it is something to be very careful about. So what can you do to avoid these kinds of problems? Well, you can try to find a good geriatrician. Their job is to coordinate care for elderly patients. But we have a terrible shortage. In the United States, there were only 7,500 geriatricians in 2013 to care for almost 48 million seniors. That doesn't work. You can see these ratios. And that number is not going to go up. They say we need 36,000 new geriatricians by 2030. Not happening. How many people know a medical student who says, I'm going to go into geriatrics? No. They want to go into anesthesia, dermatology, right? Live the good life. Why we need 40,000 dermatologists, I don't know, but all right. So a good internist can also do the care coordination job, but we have a shortage of those too. How long is an average appointment with a doctor?
15 minutes maybe.
15 minutes if you're super lucky, if you're special, right? They don't have time to multiple times a year to go over your medication list and listen to you about what's going on and your procedures and so on. They don't have time to do really thorough care coordination. And so that is a big problem. So a key piece of advice is be an active member of your own medical team. Feel empowered. Learn about your conditions. talk to other patients. Read stuff on the internet. There's a lot of garbage, but there are a lot of really good sources on the internet also. Government sources, the Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes of Health, professional organizations, the American Heart Association, the Michael J. Fox Parkinson's Foundation. You can find good information. If you've had a test done and they're not contacting you with your results, call them. You have a right to ask for it. If you feel you need a follow-up appointment and they're not offering, they rarely do, call them and say, I'm still not feeling good. I need a follow-up appointment. And most importantly, ask questions. Do I really need this procedure? Are you sure I should take this drug? I'm already taking a lot of other drugs. I learned the importance of this from experience with my husband. Early in his disease, we went to a doctor, and the doctor was suggesting that we add a new drug. And I listened, and I realized the doctor wasn't mentioning side effects. And so I said, what about side effects? And the doctor said, oh, don't worry, most patients tolerate this beautifully. But I'm a law professor, so I heard most. So I said, what about those that don't? And finally, he acknowledged that 1 in 5 find that it clouds their mind.
Pretty high percent.
Pretty high percent. And I already had been through that with my mother, and Andy still works. He's a computer science professor at Case Western. And so we couldn't take that 20% risk. So we said, no, thank you. But we wouldn't have known if I hadn't asked the question. So now sometimes Andy goes by himself because his appointment conflicts with my teaching schedule. And he comes back and he says, the doctor was in a really good mood today. And I say, why? And he says, you weren't there. Nevertheless, very important to ask questions.
Very true.
And very important to involve trusted advocates. Don't go alone to important medical appointments. Don't go alone to the hospital or to procedures. You need someone with you who can take notes, who is going to be less nervous than you are, who can help you formulate those questions, who can talk to you afterwards about what occurred during the medical encounter. And again, people tell me I don't want to burden others. It's stressful and boring to spend a day at the doctor's office. But don't worry, you will have opportunities to reciprocate. When I was 29, I got very sick and I needed very major surgery. I was single, living in Houston, and I had to ask my mother to come take care of me for a few weeks. And of course she did it. I felt bad though because it disrupted her life. Not 6 months later, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I don't even remember a family discussion. I remember a family announcement that there is no way she was going to be treated in East Lansing, Michigan. She wanted to be treated at the world-famous MD Anderson Cancer Center, conveniently located in Houston where she had a daughter. And so she moved into my one-bedroom apartment for what turned out to be 9 months. And those were wonderful months for us. We got to know each other like we had never gotten to know each other. I'm one of 4 daughters, so there wasn't a lot of alone time with the parents when I was growing up. And we laughed together, and when she was up to it, we socialized and we went out, and we were really grateful to have that time together. And so it can even be a wonderful experience to ask for help when you need it and to give help when you can and somebody else needs it. So, to sum up, be an active member of your own medical team. Have trusted advocates. Have those all-important conversations with your loved ones about what you would want if you can't make decisions for yourself, and what they would want if they can't make decisions and you have to take care of them. In times of crisis, it is really, really difficult to make good decisions if you don't know anything about the problems that you're facing, if you haven't educated yourself, and if you haven't had the right conversations with the right people. So I think I will stop here and take questions. Yes?
How many people have off-site storage of information, and where do you put it off-site? And in the case of people with multiple, how do you view the example you talked about with the gentleman who was secretive? How do people find out where the bank accounts are, where the insurance policies are, which companies? I mean, is there a mechanism to broadcast this information to anybody who's got a policy with Mr. Jones?
Right. So there are states, I'm not sure Ohio is one of them, there are states that have registries actually of, at least of advanced directives, the medical stuff. There's a wallet card that I have seen. If you fill out these forms, there's a wallet card you can get that actually says, I have an advanced directive, here's where you can get it. So that is a useful thing. You can probably download it off the internet. And as I said, it's important if you have a lawyer, have the lawyer keep all of the documents and at least tell your loved ones who the lawyer is or your financial advisor. So I'm not sure how this family actually figured it out. But it is, in your cases, when you have conversations with your loved ones, at least try to find something out that will enable you to locate important documents, and in your case, make sure that some people have them. Yeah?
Regarding advanced directives and who has say-so about anything at all, is there a specific time period when you should be doing a look back, even though nothing has changed? My wife and I had filled out all that paperwork in the 90s. Everything is exactly the same. But could we run into a problem because they may say, well, this happened in 1995 and this is 2000 whatever?
Yeah, I mean, if it's that old, I would update it because people might question whether you've changed your mind because you were young then and maybe not as young right now. So if you have 30-year-old documents, I would either go to a lawyer. I'm a law professor, right? So I want my students to have jobs. So go to lawyers a lot. But if you don't want to go to a lawyer, you can download all of that from the internet. And I would redo that because that's a long time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The document that Ohio gives out, written by the medical profession in Ohio and the legal profession in Ohio, durable
Power of attorney.
Okay. I handed that 19 years ago or 18 years ago to a Cleveland Clinic doctor who turned to me and said, you know this directive at the end has no teeth in it. It doesn't hold us responsible. Your mother's in the stroke unit as a research center. We'll do what we want. They never followed the directive. My mother was tortured. It was horrible. So that stupid document, I don't know if it's been changed, but I looked at it at the end and there was nothing that said, if the medical profession does not follow this directive, I will use the full force of my estate to sue. It didn't have that in it.
Right. So,
I don't know if that's changed or not.
right. So that shouldn't be. That was a very bad doctor. I have heard similar anecdotes. I mean, that's why it's important to also have a decision maker who can advocate for you. And I mean, these documents they should be in full force. The hospitals now have a patient advocacy department. And if you run into that, you can go to the patient advocate or the ethics committee, which I sit on.
Document hasn't changed that you know of.
No, I don't think there are new documents that you can upload. I don't think it has changed substantively. You can always sue. The document doesn't have to tell you you can sue. You can always sue.
You can write that in.
But there are doctors, if all they have is a piece of paper, especially if it's old, there are doctors that won't respect it. If you have a decision maker who's standing there and saying, I'm telling you what my mother wants,
Yeah, this was legal. There was no
right.
aisle thing, and
So,
everything signed it.
anyway, I'm sorry you went through that.
No, I-
Yes.
Can you use your own documents? Can you have your own documents prepared and not use the boilerplate documents? And the reason I ask that, boilerplate documents are never in your favor.
Right. So,
They never are. They're always slanted towards somebody else.
right. I mean, so I do advise going to a lawyer, first of all, if you have special needs or special requests, certainly for a will. But a lot of people, the boilerplate document doesn't give you as many choices as you might want. And a lot of people want to be very specific about what kinds of treatment they would want, what kinds of treatment they wouldn't want, under what circumstances. And so, yes, you know, you can create your own. It's helpful to use a lawyer. You do want some of the language there.
Yeah, that it would be prepared by a lawyer.
Oh, good, okay. Yes, yeah.
Not a do-it-yourself project, no.
Wonderful. So yeah, oh yeah, lawyers do this all the time. There are some very good elder law attorneys in town, and they will prepare much more specific documents that have a lot more instructions than the boilerplate ones. So that's absolutely an option.
And even some lawyers in this, then they'll say, oh, just use the standard.
Some of them might, but if you tell them, you know, I want something more detailed, I have some specific requests or needs, they will comply, or else they're not earning the money because they know that you can just download it.
And the basic general instruction, I want a document that's in my favor and not in the favor of another party.
Yeah, I mean,
It's like if you're drafting a document to sell a house, you can make it buyer friendly or seller friendly.
right.
And, you know, so the standard documents are not the person having the document friendly.
Right. I mean, this is not a, you know, a buyer-seller situation. The problem I see,
But I'm giving
Yeah.
you the analogy
Yeah.
that
the problem that I see with the documents is that they are not detailed enough sometimes. And so somebody who really knows their mind or has had experience with relatives might want something more detailed, and that's worth going to a lawyer and discussing. So, yeah.
and because it's the biggest problem I have, the standard documents often commingle the financial and medical aspects.
That is not true in the case of these durable powers of attorney that I've seen, but again, if you have concerns, go to a lawyer. So I want to try to get some other questions if there were any, or yeah.
Does the durable power of attorney give those individuals the power today, right here and now, to act on everything listed in that document if it's signed?
Yeah, I mean, it's up to you. So I mean, if that's what you want or that's what they want, they can say starting today. Usually it's advanced planning, and they will say once I am determined, or the person is determined to not be competent to make their own decisions. And then it takes a medical professional to say, yes, this person is no longer competent. So you can design them any way you want.
So that has to be written in then?
Yeah, that's the standard language, is once you're not competent anymore to make your own decisions.
Okay, and the living will, does that give the doctors in the hospital the decision power about whether or not you should go one way or another with whatever they deem is reality? Is it their decision?
So, I mean, the determination has to be made that you are terminally ill, permanently unconscious, or in a vegetative state, and there are some disagreements sometimes, but if you're lying there unconscious, they are supposed to follow those instructions. I mean, So it doesn't give them that much discretion, but they could say, oh no, she's not permanently unconscious, we want to wait another 2 weeks to see if she comes out of the coma.
But it is their decision. If they think you should go to hospice, you're in this state, she needs to go to hospice.
No, that's the kind of instruction you would provide in the living will. You would provide the instruction that if you are in this state, you don't want aggressive treatment, you want only comfort care, that is hospice. Or you would provide the instruction, I want everything done until the last moment. So that is your choice. It does not give the doctor's discretion. Unless they determine, they do have discretion if they determine treatment is futile. If you say, do everything as long as possible, they have the discretion to say it's no longer possible. It's not doing any good. It is just torturing the person. And then they will say, we can't do anything more. Take her to hospice. But you have a lot of, the point of this legal planning is that you do have a lot of power to provide instructions, appoint decision makers, and that is very useful.
There's another document, the name of which slips my mind, about making these types of decisions.
There's advanced directive, which is sort of the whole package. There's durable power of attorney for health care, which is appointing a decision maker. There's living will, which is giving the instructions, and then there's the organ donation form. Oh, post the physician orders, are you talking about? No,
It's
okay.
a document that leaves the decision-making with the family.
That's the durable power of attorney. But in that,
No, it's another one.
okay, well,
Because there were 5 of them laying on the table yesterday, and that was another one.
okay. Living will is, it provides instructions for end-of-life care. It says,
Ends of life.
yeah, okay? Anything else?
I guess to somewhat very generic question, just curiosity more than anything else. You show numbers of 85 years old life expectancy will be such and such, very significant. And then you also show how much money you need, and well, an average person need to actually live to that age. So I wonder when that 85-year-old life expectancy calculation, is that somehow addressed from financial perspective, or it's totally pure on the human being, blah, 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 healthy living?
Right, those are averages, as I said. People who are impoverished often don't live as long because they can't get the medical care. But we do have Medicaid right now, at least, so Medicaid will take over and pay for your care if you're completely impoverished. So there are some recourses. Okay. Yeah.
The attorney who prepared our wills explained to us that the living will was a document that provided basically the same information as the medical durable power of attorney in the event that our advocate was unable to make those decisions. And in that case, the living will would take the decision-making process away from the physician, and it's written down presumably for the physician to follow. Is that correct?
Yeah, in the durable power of attorney form, you will often say, I appoint my son, and here's what I want him to follow. Here are my general guidelines for what he should follow, and then the living will say the same thing, and if your son is not there to make the decisions, the living will take over. Now, by the way, it is important to bring these documents with you if you go to the hospital, because they can't guess. So, you need to give those to your primary care physician. Nowadays, we have electronic health records. They should be scanned into the record. Sometimes it gets lost in cyberspace because those electronic health records are humongous. So when you go for a procedure or to the hospital, if you feel strongly that you have instructions that you would want followed, you should bring them. And they should be asking you, do you have a living will or a durable power of attorney? Okay, yeah.
I'd almost suggest that nobody put that online, just bring it with them, because if you change it, it's a humongous thing to try to get it out of the computer, like you say, because I've been through that too, another nightmare. Once it's in the computer, it's
I know, I know.
And somebody might take directives from the computer that you don't want, and you're stuck. So
Right, so then the only problem is what happens if something happens when you're on vacation and you can't bring it with you, so at least your doctor has some kind of record. Yeah.
I'm actually currently dealing with this right now. I am a medical power of attorney for my mother. She just had bypass on Monday. And I've already been through this with my father. And my father had a living will. I was medical power. He told me over and over and over what he wanted. Over and over he repeated this. And when he was in the hospital and he was on a respirator and he could open his eyes, but he was confused. And he's looking at me like, save me. And you know what he said to do, and you know it's written down, but the hospital keeps asking you to do things, and it's not an easy thing.
It is not easy.
Having to decide, where do you draw the line? At 24 units of blood and constant tapping of his abdomen, you're looking at him thinking, do I say no? And you feel very responsible for their end of life. And you're trying to take these documents and the situation and work with doctors, and it's never easy. And I'm
agree.
dealing with it right now. I mean, my mom's okay, but she's not great. I'm like, oh great, here we go. And then we also have been involved with settling a couple of estates. One was a trust, one's my grandparents, one's my father. Everyone tried to do everything right. I have things in lock boxes, we have trusts written out, but addresses changed, last names changed, pages were missing out of the trust. My grandfather told us where everything was. We were still getting mail in with stock certificates and insurance policies that we knew nothing about, and it took almost 2 years to slowly, basically having mail coming to us going, oh, here's something else, here's another account, here's this. And you can try to dot your I's and cross your T's.
Right.
The 5-year thing is very, very important. My will right now is out of date, and I need to do it. I'm young and capable, and I've been procrastinating. I need to change my daughter is now 18. She does not need a legal guardian. I want her to be the guardian of my other daughter. And my sister, we're not talking because of my father's estate. And she's listed as my children's, that she should
Right,
be taken.
so
this is all really very pertinent and important, and I'm telling you, it's so hard. It is hard.
you notice the word easy was not on a single slide. Okay, I'll take one more and then I'll sit back there and we can have individual
Are
conversations.
there services to help with like finding senior living options like here in the community to help you either find, what senior living situation is the best for your particular situation, or and on the same, helping with finding elder care attorneys or, reputable, people in their field?
Yeah, so there are people who make a living consulting on these kinds of matters. So certainly on finding a good living situation, and there's even on the internet, Place for Mom or services like that will connect you with counselors. Elder law attorneys, Google searches are good, and then word of mouth, talking to someone who has had their will done or whatever. Did you like the attorney? I can provide names of people that I know, but yes, there are people, of course, you have to pay a fee, but there are geriatric care managers who help with getting medical care. I have met people who help with living situations as well. Okay, well, you've been great. I'll be sitting back there with the books and happy to talk to you further. Thanks so much. Have a good afternoon.